Welcome to the Who's Who in Eldest Justice Networks webinar. This is the second webinar in a series discussing approaches to combating elder financial exploitation. This webinar will be recorded and shared with registrants later following the session. For today's webinar, there are a few pods in Adobe Connect that you may use. On the far left of your screen is a Q&A box. Please submit any content-related questions that you would like our panelists to answer at the end of the webinar. To the right of the Q&A box is the EFPRN FAQs and links. You will find answers to common questions as well as links to popular resources in this pod. And to the right of that pod, you'll see the chat box that you can use throughout the presentation. Feel free to introduce yourself at this time. I'd now like to welcome Jennifer Duane, Senior Program Analyst in the Office of Older Americans in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to start today's webinar. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Office for Older Americans webinar, Combating Elder Financial Exploitation, in our series, Spring 2023. This is the second in our series. Today's webinar is Who's Who in Elder Justice Networks. Many types of professionals come together to effectively prevent and respond to elder financial exploitation. This webinar will introduce you to people and teams that can bring your efforts to the next level. You will learn about elder abuse multidisciplinary and case review teams, as well as key players at the national, state, and regional level, including elder justice coordinators and the Social Security Office of Inspector General, who can help support local efforts to prevent and respond to elder financial exploitation. Next slide, please. So we'll just quickly go through the disclaimer. The main point is that this presentation is being made by me or others from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, representative on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the Bureau. Any opinions or views stated by me as the presenter or moderator are my own and may not represent the Bureau's views. Quick overview of us. The Office for Older Americans at CFPB regulates the offering and provision of consumer financial products and services under federal consumer financial laws to enforce federal consumer financial laws fairly and consistently, and to educate and empower consumers making financial decisions. We develop initiatives, resources, and tools that help protect older people from financial harm and help older consumers make good decisions at key moments in their financial lives. So I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Duane, Senior Program Analyst with the Office for Older Americans at the Bureau. I've been with the Bureau since 2011, and it is my pleasure to introduce our panel. First, we will hear from Talitha Gwynn Shaver, Multidisciplinary Team's Technical Advisor at the Department of Justice. That's the U.S. Department of Justice. Talitha serves as the Elder Abuse Multidisciplinary Team, MDT, Technical Assistant for the Elder Justice Initiative at the U.S. Department of Justice. Her experience with MDTs includes her prior role as Director of the Elder Abuse Prevention Program at the Institute on Aging, where she served as the Director of the San Francisco Elder Abuse Forensic Center and Chair of the San Francisco Elder Abuse Multidisciplinary Team. She has also participated in other MDT models, such as serving on the San Francisco Elder Death Review Team and the Hoarding and Cluttering Task Force. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you, Talitha. We've known each other for many, many years, and it's wonderful that you're able to be here today. And then Michael McGill, Special Agent in Charge with the Philadelphia Social Security Administration, Office of Inspector General. Michael McGill currently serves as Special Agent in Charge of the Social Security OIG in Philadelphia for the Field Division. He's responsible for overseeing investigations in the Mid-Atlantic area. Mike began his public service career in 1995 with the U.S. Department of Education in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1997, he joined the Social Security Administration, OIG, as a special agent and has served in various capacities in the field and at OIG headquarters over the last 25 years, receiving numerous awards for meritorious service along the way. Welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for being here. And then we have Brian McDonough. Brian is an assistant U.S. State's Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio and the Criminal Division White Collars Crime Unit. He supervises investigations and prosecutes a variety of complex financial crimes. He also serves as the Elder Justice Coordinator for the Northern District of Ohio and works with federal, state, and local law enforcement and community partners to combat elder fraud and abuse. So thank you all for being here today. The speakers will talk about their professional role and experience, so you will learn about the roles of these specialists and how to work with elder abuse multidisciplinary teams, the Social Security OIG Office of Inspector General, and elder justice coordinators, which there's one in every state or in every district of the U.S. Attorney's Office across the nation. So now we will move on to a poll, I believe. First of all, poll number 1 up there on the left, how would you best describe your organization? Are you with law enforcement, adult protective services, an area agency on aging, or also known as AAA, financial institution, bank, credit union, or other financial service, payments industry, other financial service, sorry, I skipped ahead on myself, prosecution or a prosecutor, or in the prosecutorial judicial system, or other. And then poll number 2, I think you're way ahead of me here, folks. Are you part or have you been part of an elder justice multidisciplinary team? It's interesting to see that most are no, so you're really in for a treat today to learn about this. And which of the following have you worked with in the elder financial exploitation prevention work and selecting all that apply? APS is in the lead. We're still got a couple coming in, but I think we pretty much see it here. APS, law enforcement, MDTs, an elder justice coordinator, 9%, and a Social Security Administration Office of Inspector General or OIG. And then others, as with the others, if you can just add to the chat what your others are, and then we will conclude the polls. Okay, so now I'd like to hand off to Talitha Gwynn Shaver. All yours, Talitha.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you today. I see some familiar names and in the chat over here, and I'm so happy to be here chatting with all of you today. And just a quick note that the views expressed in this presentation are my own and not necessarily those of the U.S. Department of Justice. So I am currently working with the Elder Justice Initiative, and if you haven't heard of the Elder Justice Initiative, we're really here to serve any professionals that work on elder justice related issues. So whatever your professional background is, if you're from the finance world, if you're an APS worker, law enforcement, we have tools and resources here to help you better serve elder abuse victims in your community. My tiny little corner of the Elder Justice Initiative is the MDT Technical Assistance Center, and we are here to provide the tools, resources, and individualized consultations that you may need to start or expand, grow, or sustain an elder abuse case review multidisciplinary team. So you can receive free consultations. We do lots of trainings, and we have resources available for you like the MDT Guidance Toolkit that's available on our website. So since many of you do not currently serve or haven't currently or haven't in the past served on MDTs, let's chat a little bit about what MDTs are. So MDTs are rooted in the biopsychosocial model. MDTs are defined as representatives from 3 or more disciplines who are working collaboratively, bound by a common purpose. MDTs have a shared goal and a shared definition of the problem that they are addressing. So we're speaking in very broad terms about what elder abuse MDTs are today. There are many types of teams that you may have in your community that you could connect with that serve older adults. You might have an elder fatality review team, a hoarding team. You might have teams that are specific to elder abuse and do case review, guardianship teams. You might have a financial abuse specialist team, code enforcement, etc. Elder abuse case review MDTs are our main focus, and these are slightly different from some of the other teams in that they actually do the investigation together. The case review teams do. They're sitting down, reviewing casework, seeing how they can collaborate to better serve their clients. So you might have multiple agencies and organizations reviewing cases together. Each agency maintains their professional role while collaborating with the other agencies at the table. And the work complements one another. You learn a lot from one another. You're going to end up doing the work differently when you've collaborated on these cases together. The burden of investigating and responding to complex cases of elder abuse is shared among the team members, and we often note that there are better outcomes for the client, the community, and the participating agencies. So some common core team members that you might see on an elder abuse MDT include adult protective services, aging services network professionals, geriatricians or physicians, law enforcement, prosecutors, psychologists or neurologists, or neuropsychologists, victim witness advocates, etc. And many teams that have a more enhanced model will include perhaps a forensic accountant, a civil attorney or legal aid, financial institution representatives, or addiction experts, other community service providers, or maybe even a representative from your guardianship or conservatorship office. And some also include long-term care ombudsmen on their team as well. So there's a lot of focus on models. What is the best model? Should we have an enhanced MDT, a forensic center? Should we have a team that's formed within our family justice center? There are many ways that you can go about collaborating with one another. And I think it's a little bit like talking about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. When we talk about MDTs, you remember back to the first slide there, it was like 3 teams, 3 organizations working together. It can be a very basic building block. And peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so you got your 3 ingredients, so they're pretty basic. But when you start to think about your own PB&J, what you like to eat in your kitchen, you might really look very different from the other PB&Js for folks here on the call today. You might have folks who want to eat that peanut butter and jelly sandwich on a waffle or a bagel, or really preferred the pre-made ones that you can buy in the refrigerated section of your grocery store, or eating it on apple, or adding other alternative ingredients like bacon. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. But in any case, the point is that it's going to look really different from community to community or person to person. And you really have to think about what is going to work best for your community and your goals and the people that you can bring to the table. So your PB&J is not going to look the same as the one in the community next door. So instead of focusing on which model to promote or which model to try to replicate, I think that time is better spent thinking about the elements of strong multidisciplinary teams. We know that all types of multidisciplinary teams are stronger if they include shared decision-making, have strong partnerships, recognize the interdependence of the groups at the table, that they have a balance of power. Everybody feels that they can come in and have equal input into the work that they're doing together, and they have clear process. They're going to have accountability and predictability, and they understand what they're doing together and how they are going to do that work together. Some of the common pitfalls I see that teams have when they are establishing is underestimating the role of the coordinator. Training a coordinator is really critical. Coordinators are the glue that hold your team together, and it's a very complex role. There are many responsibilities that fall on the coordinator. You really have to understand the leadership qualities of an effective coordinator. And we have a coordinator training that I'm just going to plug here that is free and is open to any MDT coordinator that works on elder abuse or elder justice related issues. And that you can come and learn about how to do this highly complex job. So have a coordinator and train your coordinator if you want to have a strong team. Another pitfall that I see that teams will encounter is assuming that everybody is on the same page just because everybody has come to the table. It's important to create understanding and manage expectations. And one of the ways to do that is to really think about your purpose and establishing and defining your mission, thinking together about who you're serving, what purpose you have for your team, how you hope to accomplish this purpose together, really clearly defining the work that you're going to do together, having strong collaborative documents, etc. Knowing how you're going to do this work together. And then thinking together about what success is and what it's going to look like for your team. And to do this, you need to be able to look back and see if you've accomplished your goals. And so goal setting and scaling and attainment is very important for all of these multidisciplinary teams. You're going to want to think about how you can best serve the client and the members of your team and the larger community. So thinking about how the work that you do is going to affect everyone around you and what you want that impact to look like. I see that a lot of teams will have a very small view of the work that they can do together. They might just focus on a singular goal. And I know when I was in San Francisco, the Forensic Center there, we kind of fell prey to that. We went into our collaboration with the goal of increasing prosecution. And when we went back a year later to evaluate our work, we had done all this other wonderful stuff that we hadn't been counting, that we hadn't been looking at and examining, like preserving people's assets, increasing safety for our clients, etc. So you want to be able to look together with your team and think globally, what is the impact we're wanting to have and how can we accomplish these goals together? And then to do that, you're going to really need strong collaboration. And one of the huge problems that I see that come together, that teams come together with, is really misunderstanding about one another's roles and mandates. And it's important to cross-train your members on what each agency can and cannot do. So the role on your team and also the role of their agency. What are the legal and ethical framework that they are working within? One of the things I like to do when I work with teams is have people go around the room and say, what's one thing that they wish that everyone understood about their job? And start breaking down those barriers. People come in with many misconceptions about what APS can and can't do, what law enforcement can and cannot do, and et cetera, with all the other members. So you also, to build your strong relationships, you're going to want to ensure that everyone understands what they are going to get out of participation and what they're expected to contribute. And again, that's going to go back largely to your process and making sure that everybody has had input into and agrees upon the work that you're going to be doing together. Having those strong collaboration documents is really very important. Building trust and building those strong relationships is immeasurably important in building a strong multidisciplinary team. Ways that you can do this they seem very simple, but they're very effective. Work your cases together, get to know each other personally, ensure that everyone's voice is heard around the table, address problems and conflict head-on and promptly, focus on accountability and reliability, not blaming. It can be when you're working on these really complex cases and things aren't going the way that you envision, it can be tempting to come into the room and say, this agency or that agency is not doing their job, or we wouldn't be here, right? So we see a lot of teams kind of fall into this trap. But if you're really focusing on solutions and how you can support one another's work, you're going to have a much stronger, more effective team. And then also important is developing psychological safety. And I like this definition: a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. A team climate characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect, in which people are comfortable being themselves. There are lots of really wonderful ways that you can cultivate psychological safety on your team. I'm going to breeze through just a few of them. These are in your presentation, so you can look at them further later. But being willing to talk about failure and the value of learning, really exploring your purpose and what's at stake, why you're doing this work. Having situational humility, really asking open questions and valuing curiosity, and to make sure that your systems and structures are designed to ensure safety and openness. Expressing appreciation. Goes a huge way on teams for developing that psychological safety and that trust among your members. Destigmatizing failure, emphasizing learning over execution, and responding to any violations, clarifying boundaries, and holding people accountable where needed. So what do we do all of this for? What can happen if you decide that you're going to bring members together, you're going to hash through all the challenges of pulling together a multidisciplinary team, getting people to agree on mission, vision, goals, objectives, MOUs, confidentiality agreements, all of the stuff that goes into the infrastructure building of your MDT. What would we do this for? And so I wanted to talk about the case of Mr. F and the power of relationships at our team. This is a case from the San Francisco Forensic Center. And this is one of the cases that really had us reevaluating how we evaluated and measured our success and reported our success out. So Mr. F went to the bank and took a huge withdrawal. In fact, withdrew his entire life savings out of his savings account. And as he was leaving, he happened to mention to one of the people who were working at the bank that he had just won the lottery and he was going to be back with so much more money and he was going to remember everyone there because they'd always been so good to him. Well, one of the bankers overheard this and they called Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services immediately reached out to our law enforcement contact on our multidisciplinary team. That law enforcement officer knew exactly the neighborhood, knew where that Western Union was that this gentleman said that he was headed to, and called the Western Union and said, I would like to talk to this gentleman, and I'm coming down right now. He and the APS worker met this gentleman at the Western Union, had a discussion with him about wiring fraud and sweepstakes scams and lottery scams, and were able to ascertain that this was actually a scam, and convinced him that it would be in his best interest to return to the bank and redeposit his money. They were able to intervene and save this person's savings. So all of this was able to occur because MDT had been working with financial institutions in the area and training them on how to recognize elder abuse and exploitation and where to report it. We've been working with APS and law enforcement on our multidisciplinary team, building these relationships where people could respond to one another quickly. And then it helped us reevaluate what we were doing. In this case, we were able to prevent abuse before it ever even happened. So we were able to provide safety to the people in our community. And while that had been part of our mission, it was not one of the goals or measurable objectives we had. We were focused on prosecution. So we went back and added these other elements so that we could capture the full work that we were doing. And while this is sort of a dream, wonderful case outcome, and all of them aren't that great, it does demonstrate the power of building those relationships in your community, and it can be forged through an elder abuse MDT. So I want to just quickly run through a couple of resources before handing it over. If you are working on an MDT or you want to see if there's one in your area, you can come over here to our MDT map, our networks map, where we are plotting elder justice networks across the country. We have over 300 teams that have joined. If you're not there, let me know. We'd love to add you. And if you're wanting to see if you have a team in your community, it's a good place to start. We also offer peer support to MDTs. So we have a community that you can join and you can talk to other MDTs about any challenges that they're experiencing or that you're experiencing, or ways that you can grow your teams, seek advice and recommendations from others doing the same work. So that's it for me. So I'll hand it back over, and I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you so much, Talitha. Next, we have Mike McGill from Social Security Administration, OIG. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to represent the Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General. I will be speaking about the seemingly less well-known role of the Office of the Inspector General world in elder fraud, abuse, prevention, so on and so forth. So just first, a little bit of general history. One of the fallouts or results of the Watergate scandal in the 1970s was Congress passed the Inspector General Act of 1978, which created the existence of offices of Inspector General in each of the main executive branch agencies at the time. So like Treasury and Justice, Health and Human Services, and so forth. And over the years since then, the OIGs have expanded to almost all of the executive branch agencies. And the idea behind the Inspector General concept was that the agency would sit inside the executive branch. So for the most part, there are presidentially appointed inspector generals, and these individuals have to be confirmed by the Senate. Although they sit in the executive branch and are responsible for providing oversight and independent investigations within their agencies, they are also required to report to Congress sort of their findings each year. In fact, twice a year in the form of semi-annual reports to Congress. So it's sort of a hybrid idea where they exist in the executive branch, but they also report to the Congress by statute. So the Social Security Office of the Inspector General was actually created and established in 1995. And the reason it was so many years after the Inspector General Act was prior to 1995, the Social Security Administration actually sat as a subcomponent within the Department of Health and Human Services. And you can imagine now, thinking about it, an agency responsible for essentially dispersing $1 trillion in benefits and payments each year, being a subcomponent of another agency was probably a bridge too far. So Congress, in its infinite wisdom, separated Social Security from Health and Human Services, and as a result, the Social Security OIG was created as well at that time. And I actually sort of got in on the ground floor when the OIG for Social Security was being created in the mid-90s there. They had a massive hiring spree, as you can imagine, to start up an agency from scratch. And I was able to obtain a job with the OIG at its inception. And I moved from Philadelphia to Salt Lake City, Utah, to establish the office there, and spent many years investigating in the Wild West. It was a fun time. So go to the next slide here. So OIGs are comprised by statute of there's an Office of Investigations and an Office of Audit, and there needs to be a counsel to the Inspector General as well as a hotline so that the OIGs can take in allegations from the public. So this is the makeup of the Social Security OIG. The agency, if you can think about it in this, I'll give you an example of how sort of to place us in the spectrum. The Social Security OIG has about 500 employees nationwide. And of those, about 500 are composed of investigators and auditors. And for instance, nationwide, there's probably between 275 and 300 criminal investigators conducting investigations. And to put that in perspective, for an agency responsible for overseeing $1 trillion a year program with 250 or so agents out there, there are more than 250 FBI agents sitting in the city of Philadelphia, where I am today, responsible for just the city of Philadelphia. So you can see that we are fighting the good fight with pretty slim resources. Now, just so you know, the OIG investigators are sworn law enforcement, so we actually have the ability to swear out warrants, arrest people, conduct search warrants. We carry firearms, or we are full federal agents, just like the FBI or the Secret Service or other agents like that. So which has become problematic lately because of the scam efforts, which I'll get into in a minute. Because we usually, when I knock on a door and say, "Hi, I'm with law enforcement, I'm with Social Security," people look at you twice because they don't really trust that Social Security has law enforcement agents, but we do. So here, so the mission of the Office of Investigations within the Social Security OIG is obviously to conduct investigations of allegations of fraud against Social Security programs. We have numerous divisions, and we have field divisions, 7 field divisions throughout the country responsible for basically different areas of the country. So, for instance, I'm in charge of investigations within Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, and West Virginia. I think I said Delaware. So the Mid-Atlantic area. So, and in that area, we have about 25 agents that are constantly conducting investigations of fraud. We also have at our headquarters, we have digital forensics and analysis division that are able to conduct computer intrusion investigations and digital evidence and things like that. That's where our hotline is. And then just, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but Social Security Administration is one of the only large agencies in the government that is actually not headquartered in Washington, D.C. Its headquarters are actually outside of Baltimore, Maryland. When Social Security was established during the Depression, President Roosevelt wanted to sort of spread the wealth with federal employee disbursement. So instead of plopping it right in D.C. like everyone else, he actually put it in Baltimore to create jobs in Baltimore. And so that's where our headquarters is. And we work very closely with federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. And we participate in many national task forces, which I'll get into in a minute. So let me go here. So this is just an example of our investigative workload for a 6-month period. So these are statistics from one of our semi-annual reports to Congress that I mentioned earlier. And these would be the types of allegations that the OIG received in that period of time, just for 6 months last year. And you can see the number one source of allegation the OIG received was imposter scam allegations, which often target the elderly. Another source of allegations is disability insurance. So most people think of Social Security Administration as the agency that supplies retirement benefits. Each of us, for the most part, pays into Social Security throughout our lives out of our weekly paychecks. And then when you achieve retirement age, which is currently sits at 62, you can file for Social Security retirement benefits. But another main component of what Social Security does is if you pay into the system, like I just described, and you become disabled for some reason, and it's a very complex process, but if you become disabled, say you were paralyzed or you fell off a roof and your back was so damaged that you couldn't work anymore and you could not support yourself with substantial gainful activity, you can apply for disability benefits. And then if you go through that process and are ultimately approved for disability, then you can receive disability benefits for because you're insured. So you can see that's the second main source of allegations the OIG receives, and that's a lot of times it's nosy neighbors saying my neighbor's on disability and he's out cutting his grass, or my neighbor's on disability and he's delivering pizzas or whatever. We get obviously thousands of those allegations, which we have to vet through and investigate the more serious ones. The next category obviously is Social Security number misuse. So Social Security number misuse can tie into just about any kind of fraud, any kind of white collar fraud. There's almost always Social Security number misuse. This is also true with some categories I'll get into later in more detail, which do affect elder abuse as well. The next category, old age and survivors insurance, that's actually the retirement benefits I was talking about earlier. And one of our main sources of business for the OIG at Social Security is what we call deceased payee cases, which many of you bank investigators out there on the call will probably recognize. And this occurs when an individual is receiving usually retirement benefits and they pass away. And for some reason, there could be a typo on the death certificate or a typo on the nursing home reporting information or for some reason like that, Social Security is not notified of the death, and the benefits just keep going into the account. And they will keep going for years unless someone brings it to the attention of the Social Security Administration or the OIG. So that's where you bank fraud investigators can help out by notifying the Social Security OIG if you think that is happening at your bank. In these cases, when we are receive an allegation that someone is deceased and the benefits kept going, we will obtain death certificates if we can find them. These are the cases also where we oftentimes find bodies buried in backyards and in basements because the people, relatives wanted the money to keep going so they could actually live off of the money themselves. We have cases like that all the time. And then so this involves obviously theft of government money, which we then would take to assistant U.S. attorney like Mr. McDonough, who's speaking next, and see if they will take the case. And we've had some pretty amazing cases. You've probably seen some of them on your sensational shows on cable TV about some of these deceased pay cases. The next category is SSI disability. So this is another program that the Social Security Administration administers, which is these are individuals who are not insured. They do not pay taxes out of their wages. These are individuals that would be considered sort of destitute. They don't have any resources. They're not usually employed. They don't make enough money to qualify for Social Security insurance benefits. And if these individuals become disabled, and then ultimately aged, then they can apply for SSI, Supplemental Security Income Disability. And then these individuals, if approved, can receive payments each month. And again, there's a slew of cases involving individuals that are concealing assets to qualify for SSI that the OIG works. And then another sad source of allegations is employee fraud, which the OIG is tasked with investigating as well. And that would be, Social Security has, I believe, right around 60,000 employees nationwide. And you can see there's a certain subset of those individuals that, for some reason or other, decide to engage in criminal activity. And then it's our job to investigate that. And then finally, the threats. Sadly, in the era we are now, where there's a strong anti-government sentiment, that brings with it individuals that make threats, threats against the lives of Social Security employees who are trying to administer the benefits. And individuals get frustrated and make threats, make bomb threats, make verbal threats, assault them. And then those cases also are sent to the OIG to investigate as well. So that's just a flavor of what we do. Another sort of focus of what the OIG does is, I just explained the individuals that we investigate that are already on benefits. Well, so we have the OIG has a cooperative disability investigations program where the idea of these units is to investigate individuals that are actually in the application process for disability benefits. And the idea behind it is if it's easier to investigate an individual who's in the application process, because as part of their application, they have to list their disabling factors, like they're not able to stand for so long or walk or carry this or carry that. And if our agents work with law enforcement partners at the state level, oftentimes attorney general's offices, Medicaid fraud unit agents, sometimes local PDs, and we partner with Social Security management specialists and Department of Disability Services for each state, for the individuals that actually process disability applications. We work with those in sort of a task force setting, and we go out and do surveillance on these individuals that while they're actually applying for benefits. And if we can find evidence that they are not really disabled as they say they are, we send that to the proper authorities within the agency, and then they can determine whether or not the individual actually is deserving of benefits. And then the idea is to sort of cut them off before they ever get on benefits. And then most of these cases do not involve criminal activity. They are criminal charges, I should say, because there is no fraud loss to the government. So that's another And then this slide here shows where the OIG offices are throughout the nation. So you can see we are in every state, and these are usually, our offices probably have no more than, 10 people in any one office, and oftentimes half of that, because there's only, like I said, around 275 of us around the nation. So you can see we're spread thin, but we are in every state. So you have a contact in every state, wherever you are listening to me right now, where you can reach out to an OIG agent. So let me here. So these are some of the remedies that we do in our investigations. Obviously, as criminal investigators, the main focus is on criminal prosecutions. We also do civil prosecutions if there is a false claim against the government. We will work with the civil side of the U.S. Attorney's Office to file a False Claims Act case. And then we also have administrative remedies, which I sort of just discussed with those CDI units, denying claims, getting benefits stopped if we find an individual is not deserving of them, and sort of those ideas there as well. So our partnerships are pretty wide. When we first started 25 years ago, we were new to the law enforcement world, and we have, over the course of the last 25 years, built relationships at every level, local, state, federal. We try to provide information, which I'll show in the next few slides here, how the OIG can actually assist other law enforcement agencies. But we work, because of our small size of our the number of agents, we find it very advantageous to work in that sort of task force settings. So some of the task forces that we work with the U.S. Attorney's Office are one of them is called the SAR task force, which is the Suspicious Activity Report. And all of you bank fraud investigators out there would recognize what this is. This is banks and financial institutions are required to report suspicious activity in the accounts that they oversee and refer those to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the U.S. Attorney's Office usually has a task force with multiple agencies that then sort of analyze those SARs and glean allegations and leads for criminal investigations. So this is one of the things that we've noticed recently with a lot of these scams that we're seeing is, and another hybrid form of case I'll get into in a second, which is people are now using online stolen PII to actually file claims online for Social Security retirement benefits for individuals. And when they do that, they are trying to defraud as many people as possible, and they'll oftentimes funnel numerous people's Social Security checks to these sort of fraudulent bank accounts that they've opened up using stolen PII. And if banks see patterns where multiple individual Social Security benefits are all of a sudden being deposited, and that's a sign that it's probably some kind of nefarious activity, and that would be another reason to reach out to the OIG or the U.S. Attorney's Office in your local area to report that. Because one of the problems we run into is we're often responding to a crime that has taken place, at which point in time the money has usually been drained out of the account and used to purchase, Target gift cards or Apple gift cards or whatever the case may be. And it's always difficult to trace that money once it's gone. I'm sure Mr. McDonough will talk about that. So one of the holy grails of an OIG investigation like this would be to actually obtain information in real time and be able to open an investigation in real time and work with the bank to freeze the account and then be able to reclaim that money and give it back to the rightful owners of that money. That's always the golden unicorn we're all looking for. So other task forces that the OIG works with are elder fraud abuse task forces. In my own field division, we are on the elder fraud abuse task force in the Eastern District of Virginia. We're on the Virginia Financial Crimes Task Force, the Identity Theft Working Group in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. We're on many COVID-19 fraud task forces, bankruptcy fraud task forces, elder fraud justice working group in Western District of Pennsylvania and in Virginia. So these are just some of the task forces that we often work on. fugitive task forces, mortgage task forces. So you can see the OIG, even though we're small in size, we try to provide through the force multiplier effect of task forces sort of results that outweigh our size. So for law enforcement verification requests, so this is something that the Social Security OIG, my agency, has an memorandum of understanding with Social Security Administration, where the OIG is allowed to actually verify Social Security numbers for in certain situations. Now, as you can probably recognize, the Social Security Administration has, the most sensitive PII, or personally identifying information, out there. We actually have, in addition to everyone's Social Security number and all of the benefits information, we also receive all of the wage reporting for the entire country each year, because that is used to in calculating insurance benefits and retirement and disability and so forth. So we have a lot of sensitive information, including IRS information. So the disclosures are very sensitive and very tricky, but this is one what we do have. So if a law enforcement agency has instances where they believe a Social Security number is being misused or not belong to the individual that they're investigating, they can actually send a request. We call them lever requests or law enforcement verification requests to the OIG, as long as it meets the criteria here, which includes the name and the Social Security number of the individual that they're investigating. The OIG, we can actually go into the Social Security system and see if that name matches that Social Security number or not. And then we can reply to the law enforcement, tell them that's a good match or that's not a good match. So that's a valuable tool that we use oftentimes. And we can, if anyone has a question about that, I can answer them later. So here's some of the key statutes that the OIG investigates. So most federal criminal law, as Mr. McDonough can probably talk to, is in Title 18 of the Criminal Code, which some of these statutes here that the OIG does investigate are included in. Section 181028A would be aggravated identity theft. That's if an SSN is being misused. There's actually a criminal enhancement for sort of a minimum jail time for that charge, which is very valuable to investigations. But most of the Social Security related fraud is actually contained in 42 United States Code. It's under Section 408. Those are all Social Security related specific statutes that the OIG investigates. So the OIG, like I said, is on transnational elder fraud strike task forces. And I'll let Mr. McDonough go into more detail on that next here. But the OIG, Social Security OIG, is on the Houston and Atlanta task forces. And then you can see here, a lot of what these we're seeing with these elder fraud strike forces is that these are actually becoming sort of transnational crimes, whereas a lot of the main players are actually overseas, and they are conducting this fraud, through computers or telephone calls from outside the United States, and then they are using runners. You can use, there's many terms for these individuals: runners, money launderers, mules, that are actually in the United States receiving the cash packages from victims, and then laundering the money, usually oftentimes through buying gift cards of one kind or another, and then sending it right back overseas. So a lot of our cases, we end up taking down these runners, but oftentimes the subjects of the investigation overseas remain out of reach, because sometimes we don't have extradition treaties with those countries. So that is one of the frustrations that we're seeing with these elder fraud investigations. So this is a case that we worked out of my field division. This was an elder fraud investigation based in Richmond, Virginia. And this, we received allegations from the Virginia Office of Attorney General's Medicare Fraud Unit and the Richmond Police Department that these individuals were living in sort of squalor in this house. So what happens is for Social Security Administration, if an individual is receiving either disability benefits or retirement benefits, and they are unable to handle their own money from a fiduciary standpoint, they're not mentally capable to, the Social Security will actually appoint what's called a representative payee. And that rep payee, as we call them, will then receive the money for the individuals and is supposed to spend it on behalf of the individuals. And oftentimes for this age population, these individuals are sort of have nowhere to go. So the agency will actually appoint what's called an organizational rep payee. And that organizational rep payee will house them as if like in a nursing care or home health care setting. And they are charged with actually, looking after the people and making sure that the money is spent correctly. So in this case, in Richmond, we had reports coming in that the individuals were living in squalor. And actually, a couple of people had actually been hit by cars outside because they weren't being carefully monitored and actually killed. So we worked with the FBI and the Attorney General's office, and we obtained a search warrant and went in there and found people living in absolute horror show, rotten food, feces, bed bugs everywhere. So we also determined that the individual who was overseeing the organizational rep pay unit there was actually spending the money to do things like travel and gamble in Las Vegas and Atlantic City and things of that nature. So conducted an investigation, indicted her, and she just recently was sentenced to 2 years in jail. That was the Jones and Jones nursing home down there. So that's an example of what kind of cases the OIG can participate in. Other examples are these, what I call e-service investigations. That's what I was referring to earlier, where individuals overseas are now filing applications for individuals' retirement benefits, and they're buying purchased PII off of the dark web, and they're very clever. They've determined that wealthier Americans may not actually file Social Security when they're eligible, simply because they don't need the money. So they wait till later, oftentimes till they're 70. So these individuals have figured out how to go in, file benefits online using that individual's identity, and direct them to bank accounts. And then the individual never finds out until they actually go in to retire themselves, to file for retirement themselves. You can imagine the shock if that happened to you. So this is a case that we worked where they were hitting up. Some of the victims included judges, actors, individuals like that. Again, it's a pretty clever scheme. And oftentimes these funds, they file these applications online and they have the money deposited on green dot cards. So that's another sort of factor you can look for, is any kind of money being switched to green dot cards. There's oftentimes some fraud involved with that as well. So I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to swim through here quickly. Imposter scams, as you can see, took over the world right before COVID, and then it switched to COVID fraud. But the imposter scams are when individuals, you probably received these phone calls yourself, where the individual calls and says, "Hey, I'm with Social Security. Your Social Security number has been compromised. I'm here to help you. I need you to go down to Target and buy a gift card." I know it sounds crazy, but that actually works. And we received hundreds of thousands of allegations each year. Here are some of our scam call statistics. You can see the losses are staggering here. Again, as I talked about, international call centers are the main gateway carriers. They use gateway carriers in America that actually route the phone calls. The victim then picks up. The victim then gives the money to a mule, and then it gets laundered overseas, as I talked about. We have successfully been able to intercept some of those cash packages from our investigations, and that is a great day when you can actually return someone's life savings to their account. So one of the things that we did as an agency was we actually went after the call centers and the local phone companies that were actually allowing this to happen. and we actually are able to successfully get some of those shut down. So let's see, there's an example there in California where the Attorney General for California sued the voice over internet protocol carrier. These are the signs of the scam. I'm sure you're all aware of these. They pretend, they tell you there's a prize or a problem they need help with. They put pressure on the individual, and then they get them to go get the money out of their account and buy gift cards or whatever. So these are some of the signs. You're all aware of those. The OIG has a robust slam the scam education policy. The OIG realizes that we can investigate as much as we want, but educating the public is probably the best way to stop this. So it's very difficult because older people are trusting of authorities of figure. When people call up saying they're government employees, they trust them, and it's a hard sort of circle to break. And then here is, you can take a picture of this with your phone, and this will take you to our website, which has a lot more information and also ways for you to contact us. So with that, I'm sorry if I went over, but I will pass it on.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was really interesting. Next, we have Brian McDonough, who will talk about the role of the Elder Justice Coordinator. Go ahead, Brian.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian McDonough. I am an assistant United States attorney in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio, where the sun is always shining and the sky is always blue. I am the lucky federal prosecutor who is the Elder Justice Coordinator for our office. Let me tell you a little bit about the United States Department of Justice. As Talitha described as well, the United States Department of Justice, headquartered in Washington, D.C., and prosecutions are handled either by trial attorneys from that office or by assistant U.S. attorneys in local offices across the country. The United States Department of Justice has as the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. Ultimately, all federal prosecutors work for and answer to him. He's been in office since March 11th, 2021. Here is our U.S. Attorney's Office in Cleveland, Ohio, where we handle the northern half of the state of Ohio. But just like our office, no matter where you are, there are U.S. attorneys' offices across the country. There are 93 U.S. attorneys that cover the entire United States. We all handle federal criminal law. We are all responsible for enforcing federal criminal law. And when it comes to elder fraud, it is a top priority of our Department of Justice. There's a lot of overlap made between local, state, and federal. It can be a little bit of a maze. So the Department of Justice came up with this hotline, the National Elder Fraud Hotline, 1-833-FRAUD-11, 1-833-372-8311. What I love about this hotline is when you call it, there might be one prompt, but then eventually a human is going to answer it. And what they'll do is a victim can call, a family member or friend of a victim can call to report elder fraud. And what will happen is that this call will get routed and the person will be pointed in the right direction as to where the call should go. And a case manager will go ahead and be assigned. And why is this important? Well, every year, over 2 million people over the age of 65 are the victims of identity theft. We used to think that there's only two groups of people: those who've had their identity stolen and those who will have their identity stolen. About 13% of older Americans are the victims of financial fraud every year. About 10,000 people turn 60 every day in the United States on it. And then sadly, a lot of shame and reporting, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of, just the disappointment on it. And so, some studies show, one out of New York State showed that only 1 out of 44 victims, elderly victims of fraud, actually reported it. And so as elder justice coordinator, my job is to go ahead and to change that. We have a wonderful resource available at elderjustice.gov. And that provides a host of information, provides some roadmaps no matter where you are in the country. It allows users to that site to go ahead and navigate. There's absolutely wonderful materials. Because really, when you think about it, it comes down to this. If your house was on fire, who would you call? Fire department? How about your neighbor's house? That was on fire. Who'd you call? Fire department? How about a house 3 blocks away? Who'd you call? Fire department. There is no way, possibly, as Special Agent in Charge McGill mentioned, no way we can arrest, investigate, and prosecute our way of this. The resources of outreach and education are key as a community to go ahead and combat elder fraud. One of the things that we have through the Department of Justice is this Elder Justice Initiative. It was started several years ago, and it really involved reporting on elder abuse, reporting on elder fraud. There's an annual report that is issued by Congress every year. At the local level, and building on what Talitha said about MDTs, these multidisciplinary teams, when you bring together federal, state, and local law enforcement, you got all 3 levels covered. And then when you have community partners, agencies, nonprofits, the medical community, the aging community, you have built a wonderful, robust team to go ahead and address the multifaceted issue. In Cleveland, Ohio, we're lucky to have Scam Squad, which is part of the local county government. It's an extraordinary organization that is part of the government that brings together folks from a variety of agencies to educate and share and really puts a nice, we like a 2-prong approach. Number 1, we have to educate and do outreach. And number 2, then law enforcement has to go ahead and do everything they can to try to dismantle, detect, and disrupt elder fraud. So we meet monthly. Hey, scams are changing every day. They're always increasing. So spreading that knowledge through social media, sharing that knowledge is incredibly effective when you look at the cost of preventing a crime versus having to investigate, arrest, and prosecute it. Top 5 frauds for 2023. Business email compromise, romance scam, cryptocurrency, ransomware, and tech support. If you haven't heard of these, you should. You should on these. And the business email compromise is one where obviously the scammer sends an email messages that appears to come from somebody else. And that can be a business, a vendor, a real estate company, could be a financial institution like a bank. And it could be any of those sorts requesting payment. Romance scam, incredibly popular. That scam, the scammer adopts a fake online identity to gain that victim's affection and trust, typically on a social media dating website. And there's this illusion of a romance, and it's a long-term con. And these dollar amounts that victims end up sending go from from $100 to $1 million. Cryptocurrency, something new criminals are always using. It's what you need to know about cryptocurrency is that if anybody, only scammers demand payment in cryptocurrency. Okay. No legitimate business is going to demand that you send cryptocurrency in advance. And scammers will, claim that there's big returns and investment on it. We see a lot of that. And that's all a scam. Ransomware, unfortunately, with the higher computer use, it's ransomware is a computer virus, a form of malware that ends up locking a computer, locking a device, unless a ransom is paid, typically in the form of cryptocurrency. And lastly, tech support. Tech support, the scammers want you to believe that your computer is infected, like with a virus. They want you to pay for tech support services. Typically, they gain access through remote online access to that. These scams between international and domestic are probably about 50-50. We see 50% of them taking place where the scammers originate in countries around the world, and we do our best to identify and extradite them back to the United States for prosecution. And about half of the scams are located within the U.S. Probably the big key is the two differences in the scams. One is like the romance scam could be a long-term scam. The other one is that short-term. The danger, act now, send money now. And Special Agent in Charge McGill mentioned an imposter scam, or you're going to get arrested, or you're behind on your taxes, or your Social Security benefits will be stopped, or your bank teller is under investigation. So we need you to go to your bank and withdraw funds on behalf of the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration. Okay. You're never going to get a call from your bank telling you to go to your financial institution and withdraw money and convert it to cryptocurrency or to do something else. There was a bank robber in the 1930s by the name of Willie Sutton, and when asked why he robbed banks, his famous answer was, because that's where the money is. Scammers today are taking advantage of vulnerable elderly victims and essentially having them rob banks. That's what they're doing. For those of you who are involved in financial institutions, those tellers are the front line defense. The examples given, anytime you have a customer who's coming into a bank, an elderly person who's 80 years old, Social Security deposits monthly, and all of a sudden they're taking out cash. And without having a colloquy, a conversation about that, they're taking out 8, 10, 12, whatever amount of cash. Questions should be asked, because that's really that front line. Typically, that's going to be a scam. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a case I had called the grandparent scam, United States of America versus John Tyler Pla. And in this scam, the scammers are part of a conspiracy. Those call centers come in, they use the telephone, and they call and they impersonate the grandson or granddaughter. And they say grandma, grandpa, and then the recipient of the call thinks that's my grandson, my granddaughter. And the line is, they've been in a car accident, they've hit a pregnant woman, they've been arrested, they need 8,000 cash for bail money. There's a gag order on the case. Can you help? Can you help? And the scammers have a pretty good playbook that if someone sounds differently, they'll be like, oh, well, I broke my nose in the scam or whatever. And this will send grandparents to banks to go ahead and withdraw cash amounts, sometimes once, sometimes twice on it. And more often than not, the banks will simply let that transaction occur without any questions on it. And the scammer will send a courier over to pick up the cash. And lo and behold, later that day or the next day, the victim finds out that their grandson or granddaughter is perfectly fine. They feel embarrassed, they feel shameful about it, and it goes unreported, and the cycle repeats itself. With artificial intelligence now, the artificial intelligence is able to fool banks. Some banks have a voice identification system, and based on social media recordings, scammers were able to use the recording of someone's voice online, replicate it, and bypass the voice identification control for a bank. In addition, they could use that same recording, extrapolate it to a vocabulary, so when that grandparent answers the phone, they may really believe that their grandson or granddaughter is on the other end of that line, when in fact it's not. As part of this one, they typically know the name of the grandparent, but they ask them, please don't tell anyone. Please keep that quiet and don't tell any family members. In the case that I prosecuted, John Tyler Pla and Johnny Lee Palmer made $383,000 in 5 weeks from 28 victims in the states of Ohio, Iowa, and Wisconsin. They crisscrossed the country and were both sentenced to between 33 and 37 months in prison. They hit large financial institutions, small financial institutions, credit unions, you name it. They hit any place where their targets had money, and they played the role of couriers. They were essentially the ones that went to go ahead and pick up cash. Thank you so much. It's very satisfying for me when I prosecute individuals. To me, it helps bring some measure of justice for those victims of crime. This crime has increased, and as Special Agent in Charge McGill mentioned, since last year, $3.1 billion last year in cases alone. It's an 84% increase from the year before. And for federal law purposes, who counts as an elderly person or as an elder under federal law? If you're age 60. And the average hit, according to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, was a $35,000 loss. Financial institutions have a vested interest in keeping the community safe. We are happy to partner with them, and we encourage you to do so. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today.
Great. Thank you so much for that. That was just really informative, and all three of you riveting, frankly, and super informative. Now we will move on to our Q&A portion. We have a number of great questions here, and I wanted to put one up first for Brian, for Mike here. There's a question about, are there training opportunities available from the OIG, the Social Security OIG?
Yeah, I'm trying to get my camera going. Yeah. Oh, here we go. So the OIG is always happy to do outreach. We oftentimes will, most of the time it's with federal, other law enforcement partners, state, local, or federal. But yeah, if there's any requests for specific training, we can tailor training to anybody. And that is part of what we like to do is educate people. So I would suggest clicking on that or taking a picture of that key code there and going to our website and then making an inquiry there.
Yeah, and I'll also suggest that if folks are interested in training, they could put that in the chat as well, and we can sort of round that up and follow up, help follow up or connect the dots as needed. So do let us know. Thanks for that. And then there's another one here for you. How can older Americans determine if their Social Security has been compromised? Does the SSA assist in determining what occurred?
So the best way for an individual to determine what's going on with their account within Social Security is to go to Social Security's website, not the OIG's, but the Social Security Administration website, which is www.ssa.gov. And there are lots of links, but you can actually create what's called a My SSA account. And once you create that, you'll be able to see all the information necessary. And you're actually also able to do things in that account as well, like file for benefits, change your address, change your number, change your bank number. The problem we're seeing now is some of these fraudsters are actually now hacking into that system with stolen PII and actually rerouting existing benefits to third-party bank accounts and stealing the money that way. So that's another issue that we're dealing with in this cyber age that we all live in. But My SSA is the best way to determine what's going on with your account.
Super. And you remind me that this is an opportunity to refer people to Money Smart for Older Adults. It's a program that we produce with the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And there is a whole section on protecting your Social Security account. And there's also, I think, pretty explicit instructions on how to set it up in there. So that's consumerfinance.gov. If somebody wants to throw this in the chat, that'd be great. consumerfinance.gov/MoneySmart. And that'll get you to the entire curriculum, which covers lots of different types of frauds and scams, but it does cover the SSA, my Social Security account. Okay, so Talitha, there's a question here for you. Do any MDTs use both the general and enhanced models at the same time? For example, having a subcommittee for the enhanced MDT activities?
Yeah, so I think the question here is kind of about how do you take on different responsibilities within your team. So enhanced or not enhanced MDT, those are just terms to describe like the diversity of your membership, really. But I have seen teams that will split their meetings to take on different responsibilities. So in San Francisco, we had a meeting that was for prosecution. So we had our ADAs are present there, law enforcement, and we were focused on criminal investigation, how we could help move that forward with all of the agencies that needed to be involved. And then we had a meeting where we took on cases that maybe it hadn't risen to the level of a crime yet. And so we were looking to put services in place. So, for instance, some of the cases we saw were maybe neglect cases where the caregiver also needed support. So maybe you had a caregiver who was experiencing cognitive decline and no criminal charges were going to be brought because both individuals actually needed support within the community to thrive. So you can look at dividing responsibilities in whatever way works for your community. And the second part of there was subcommittees. So yes, I think having a subcommittee is great. You can have a subcommittee that's working on the development of your goals for the next year, or your program evaluation, or your outreach projects, or reaching out to other community service providers that you might like to bring into your team. Subcommittees are a great way to get that focused work done.
Great, thank you. And for Brian, how does the Elder Justice Coordinator assist an MDT in working through cases, or do you?
Sure. Yes. In terms of working through cases, often we act as a clearinghouse between what cases might be good for federal prosecution versus what cases might be good for state prosecution. Obviously, there's a variety of crimes, whether it's elder abuse, whether it's elder fraud. There's also different requirements in those statutes. So, in some cases, based on the amount of loss, based on the location of the victim. Some cases might be better on the federal level. Some cases might be a better fit on the state level. So, as an elder justice coordinator in working with an MDT team, I can kind of help steer them, direct them, and as they say, advocate for where may be the best possible place for prosecution.
Okay. And another one here. Here's one for you, Talitha. It's do MDTs work best at the county level, or do they ever encompass multiple counties, like regional MDTs, for example?
Yeah, again, so there's no best model. And so we've seen city-based teams, I've seen jurisdictionally based teams. In Tennessee, they're multidisciplinary teams are housed within their prosecutors' offices. And so their area of jurisdiction is the area where they'll receive cases from their APS and law enforcement. I've seen state MDTs, regional MDTs, multi-county MDTs. We had a really interesting MDT in Ohio where the county split two states, and they had a joint MDT, and that was it took a lot of work because you're bringing in people from two different states on their team. Any configuration can work as long as you're able to bring the right players to the table and you have a clear understanding of what you're hoping to accomplish together, and you really understand what each member can contribute, what they can and can't do.
Okay, and then there is a question about needing more information on organizational payees that are also responsible for a person's well-being. And I'm not sure if that fits into what we're talking about today, but I wanted to give you a chance, Mike, to address that if you wish.
Sure. Yeah. So that's one of the sort of conundrums with Social Security Administration's rep payee program, because unfortunately, all of the statutes that we have to enforce any kind of wrongdoing with rep payees all comes down to the money. As Mr. McDonough will say, obviously, a lot of federal crimes are about the money. So there is no quality of care issue in our statutes that we can enforce. So, and most organizational rep payees actually do not house the individuals at their site. There are oftentimes these individuals live by themselves because they don't have anyone to live with, and they can't afford to live in an actual nursing home. So they oftentimes live by themselves but the organizational rep pay actually still administers the money for them. So it gets pretty tricky. The instance down in Richmond, which I talked about, that was a care home where she actually offered housing for the individuals and was the organizational rep pay. So that was sort of like an outlier. But we have run into a few of those. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but it is the reality.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I have one here for you, Mike. What is the DOJ MDT TAC's relationship? Oh, this sounds like this might be Talitha, with the New York City Elder Abuse Coalition-based National Elder Abuse MDT Training and Technical Assistance Center. So did I?
Yeah, I think that one's for me. Yes. So NICEAC is one member of the National MDT Technical and Training and Technical Assistance Center. They have a long name. They were formed to provide technical assistance to OVC-funded MDTs. So they have their cohort of multidisciplinary teams that they provide resources and technical assistance to, training for. I am available to provide that training for anyone in the country. So it doesn't matter if you've got funding through OVC or not. If you're just an individual with an idea that wants to get started, bringing together a coalition to form an MDT, you can give us a call. If you are on an established team and you've got multiple funding sources, it doesn't matter how you're funded, where you are, you can come to the DOJ Elder Justice Initiative MDT Technical Assistance Center, and I'll do my best to connect you with folks and give you resources.
Great, thank you. And I think this would be,
just add.
I think this would be for both Mike and Brian. Have you investigated cases? So maybe you each have an answer on this one, in which persons subject to adult guardianships have been placed in guardianships in part to access their Social Security benefits. That's for you, Mike. But I'm also interested in Brian, your response to the guardianship issue and other earned federal entitlements, as their guardian will be the de facto representative payee. So which of you would like to go first?
I can go first. So it does get tricky with, like I said, with our investigations, because especially if the individual, if they are their rep payee, I mean, there's no such thing as a sort of de facto rep payee. The agency is very strict on the money. If there's a rep payee, they have to apply to be the rep payee. There's a process, and then the money for a rep payee, like for instance, my father-in-law, he had a stroke, and my wife was his rep payee. The money actually goes to, in that case, to my wife in the name of her father. So the money actually goes to the rep payee. It is addressed, and that's the individual who's responsible for the money. And each year they have to report what they spent the money on. In this case that you're talking about, if there's like a guardianship situation and the money is actually going into the actual recipient's account and then it's being spent by the family member, we don't have a statute that can cover that, unfortunately. That's one of the frustrations of the job and the way the system is set up. But so I will defer to AUSA McDonough on this one.
Sure. No, sadly, guardianships present an unbelievable opportunity for fraud, theft, and embezzlement. And sadly, the United States Department of Justice, we have prosecuted guardians who have taken funds that belong to their ward, and instead of using their funds for the benefit of the ward, have used those funds for their own use. It's challenging. Local probate courts have the state jurisdiction, and the guardians are supposed to file detailed accounting for each and every dollar of what is. So, we've had cases where that guardianship is essentially it's an abuse of trust. We've had other cases where the ward has an opportunity to get their own attorney and challenge the guardianship. But sadly, all the legal fees that result in litigation from that end up coming out of that guardianship account, the ward's account. And that can quickly be depleted with long term or expensive litigation. Part of the guardianship under the Elder Justice Initiative is to, as I say, is to spread community outreach and awareness regarding that. And if a family member believes that a guardian is taking advantage of their ward, we ask to go ahead and obviously report that to the local authorities, and they can go ahead and we can then investigate it from there. Some of the statutes we have used include mail fraud, wire fraud, and bank fraud in prosecuting those cases.
Thank you so much for that. And I have a sort of general question for all three of you that just might want to get your perspective on. How do you see sort of the trends around financial institutions in terms of collaboration and or reporting and being part of the solution, engaging with MDTs, sitting on MDTs or working with you in your investigations? Shalita, you want to go first?
Sure. I can say over the last 7 years, when I've been working at the national level, I've seen a lot more financial institutions getting involved in this area and participating with MDTs, which I think is very heartening. I'm also seeing trends in statutes and legislations mandating reporting of elder abuse for financial institutions. So I think that we are in a positive trend. Of course, it's spotty and you see a lot of variability across the country as to who's tapped in and who's getting training and who's participating. But I think that a lot of financial institutions realize it's in their best interest and in their community's best interest to be a part of the solutions for elder financial abuse and exploitation. So I think things are trending in the right direction from what I can see.
Great. And Mike?
Yes. So going back to my earliest days as an agent, some of my most valuable resources and partners were bank fraud investigators because they have the data. They see the fraud patterns and they were able to reach out. And everything in life is about forming relationships. So I highly encourage any of you out there in MDTs or in the bank fraud investigator world to reach out to your local OIG agents and form relationships, because the information can flow both ways. When we have criminal investigations open and we're working with U.S. attorneys' offices and we have subpoenas, because oftentimes we get these account information and in this new age, oftentimes we don't even know how to read the account information. There's so much data there now that it becomes crucial to have relationships with the banks. Also, when they see the fraud patterns, like multiple deposits all of a sudden coming in from everywhere and being deposited into one account, if they see that, I mean, that's a sure sign of fraud usually. And if they reach out to their local OIG agent, we can, like I said, get a case going in real time and actually maybe catch them in real time. So I'll pass on to AUSA McDonough.
Sure. What's the old saying that a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth even gets up out of bed? When scammers are using lies to defraud banks, right? Financial institutions are on the front lines. What is the trend? Fortunately, we have some wonderful relationships with those fraud and anti-money laundering investigators for the banks that are those kind of long-term suspicious transactions, looking over algorithms, all those things to detect fraud. But boy, when it comes to the quick hitter, the one time, we've got to be perfect. And tellers at the branches and branch managers and credit unions, those folks on the front line can do so much to prevent the crime from occurring. And it's a lot easier to take the time and have a conversation with the customer, or in the states with mandatory reporting, to pick up the phone and call Adult Protective Services, call the local police department. No civil or criminal liability will attach under those laws in your state, but you can prevent a crime. And trying to go ahead and react for law enforcement reactively and trying to go ahead and get the money that now has been wire transferred away or the cash has been converted into cryptocurrency. Boy, banks, financial institutions have such a vested interest in their community. They've got a lot of skin in the game. We welcome their partnership. They should all be members of MDT, and we should do our best to go ahead and fight crime and prevent crime in that aspect. And so we welcome their partnership. Phenomenal training should occur as well.
Great. Thank you all so much, everybody, for attending and our fantastic panel of speakers today. I do want to call your attention to our network development guide. If you're interested in starting a network, enhancing or building capacity for an existing network, you can go to consumerfinance.gov/elder networks. consumerfinance.gov/elder networks. We also, you're welcome to join our mailing list if you want to learn more about our products and our resources and tools for consumers. Here it is up on the screen for you. If you'd like to email us with any suggestions or follow-up questions, eldernetworks@cfpb.gov. And before we sign off, I just want to give a plug for our next program, which is May 24th. We ended on the banking question, and the next session will be age-friendly banking and opportunities for collaboration on May 24th. Same time, same place. And then on June 1st, we have financial caregiving to discuss long-term services and support, including nursing home debt collection and financial caregiving, carefully choosing a financial caregiver to help prevent elder financial exploitation. So with that, I will say thank you all so much. And please feel free to leave comments or questions in the chat. We'll leave it on for a minute or two. And you all have a great day. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.